Peace everyone, Mascart here and welcome to another colored pencil tutorial. We are starting a new project today. You guys requested a seascape with a lighthouse, so I am doing just that. I hope you guys like the reference photo. Lots of bright colors, really nice blues, and cool looking lighthouse. I think the red in the lighthouse complements the green in the foliage. And of course, I am working on pastel matte. This will be the first time that I've tried pastel matte with colored pencils, so thank you for encouraging me to give it a try. So I'm going to go ahead and get started here. Hello, Danny and Barbara. Good to see the two of you in the chat already. Now I'll go ahead. I'll share the colors that I'm using. I didn't create a color chart, but skies are difficult when you're dealing with clouds, and I'm gonna be starting with the clouds today, and I'm gonna be using just a gray. This is a Polychromos 230 gray, and let's just get into this. I have no idea what to expect here as far as how the pencils are going to work on this paper, since it's my first time using pastel matte. So I'm just going to dive right in, and if you guys have any questions for me, feel free to ask away. I hope everyone is having a really great week so far. I've been having a pretty good week, staying busy with all the Inktober live streams and all of that. So I'm just going to use a light pressure like I normally do and just kind of get a feel for how this paper is working out with pencils. A lot of you like the pastel matte with colored pencils, and as this being the first time I've ever tried it, I'm just gonna do it cautiously. Apply my gray here. Now, one of the things with clouds is that the color is actually much darker than what your eyes usually perceive them to be. And that's just a little optical illusion, because usually the sky around the clouds are so dark that we kind of miss that the clouds themselves actually have quite a bit of color in them. Oh, hello, Diane and Helen and Gila. Good to see all of you. Hope you guys are as excited as I am about giving the pastel matte a try. You can get 40 light layers on there easy. Oh, okay. Yeah, I imagine that the amount of layers that you can create on a pastel matte is quite extensive. I'm just wondering what the final texture is going to be like, if it will be smooth or whatnot. Let's see. There's a bottom part of the cloud, and I'm gonna just kind of sketch in a little bit of the shape of the cloud that I see. There's the bottom shadow that I'm gonna focus on. Try to get that shape in there the best that I can. I'm working kind of small here because, well, it's colored pencils, and doing landscapes are hard enough. So doing a big one would really take a lot of live streaming, and I like to get through the projects, but I'd say that my approach, just like last time, being a little bit looser. If you want to tighten up your drawing, you just work a little bit bigger and work a little bit slower. All the techniques and everything are the same to get a more realistic drawing. It's just the difference is the amount of time and effort that you put into recreating the recreating the reference photo. Hold on one second. I got a shadow coming across here. Yeah, usually I put my TV up higher. I have different levels, and I don't have the best lighting setup, so I have to put it up. Is this a cold gray? And is pastel matte smooth? This is a cold gray. Yes, this is a cold gray, which is a little counterintuitive because the sky is very warm, but only the blues. The clouds are a cooler tone. They actually have a little touch of purple in there too. And then as you get up to the clearer sky, that part of the sky is a warmer blue. The colors that separate the clouds from the rest of the sky they're really subtle. And one of the contrasting points between them is that the clouds are a little bit cooler color blue and the sky is a little bit warmer color blue. And those differences just helps offset and make the clouds stick out a little bit more. And is pastel matte smooth? I would say for colored pencils, it's not very smooth. It has a graininess to it, but it's kind of smooth feeling to your finger, kind of like a velvet, but like a rougher velvet, not quite as soft. I don't know if you can hear the pencil scraping the paper, but it has a grindy sound to it as I move the pencil. Oh, hello, Marcy. Yep, experimenting with pastel matte officially, for real this time. I didn't forget. And hello, Bonnie. Pastel matte so far feels pretty similar to sanded paper, but like the higher grit sanded paper, like 800 or 1000. It has like a pull to it as far as the pencil not quite wanting to like go across the paper. It kind of has a little bit of resistance there. Alright, I'm going to add a little bit of a purplish blue. This is the Polychromos 146 if you're interested. Like I said, I'll share my colors to an extent with you guys, but just like the last landscape, I really want you to build your confidence with your own color choices. So I don't want you to really rely on knowing my colors. When it comes to other types of projects, I find it useful to know exactly what colors I'm using. But when it comes to landscapes, it's really important to just kind of feel the colors out a little bit on your own and just gain that extra experience from the projects. Oh, hello, Mindy. It's nice to see a whole lot of you in the chat today. I'm gonna try to blend the pencil out with a blending stump and see how that goes before attempting solvent. I'm a little hesitant about adding solvent to the project simply because the pastel mat's a lot thicker and it's more absorptive than the smoother papers that I generally use. And sitting around and waiting for it to dry is not going to be the highlight of the live streams. So I'm thinking that I might just keep this project dry from solvent. Or if I do blend, it will be like the very last thing I do for the live stream. I do get a lot of graininess to my pencil. Lots and lots of texture from the paper showing through here. So that's not usually what I like to see. I generally like my stuff to be really smooth, but I'm going for it. I'm going for it. I'll just keep on coloring. The solvent needs to dry for a long time on pastel mat. Yeah, that's what I assumed. That's what I assumed. If I can get a good effect with blending with a blending stump rather than solvent, then that's the route that I'll go. Because if you're unaware, I've been well, I haven't gotten to work on it in a couple weeks or whatever, but my realism challenge that I gave myself, I'm doing that completely without solvent, and I'm blending it with a blending stump. But that's on much smoother paper. Well, it's actually on vellum paper, so it's not terribly smooth, but significantly smoother than pastel mat. It takes many layers to get smooth. Yeah, I mean, eventually the tooth of the paper has to fill in, right? So, patience is always something that I stress. So, getting it smooth, I imagine, will just take a bit of time. I'm gonna use a little bit of white first and see if I can't smooth out that blue and gray with a bit of white here. Oh yeah, that actually works really nice. I can kind of just rub the blue a little bit, and it does get rid of that grainy look. So that actually looks pretty good. You know, my experience with sandpaper, I've used the UArt sandpaper before with colored pencils, and this has a similar feel to it as far as like the kind of scratchiness that you experience as you move the pencil over the paper. But you can use solvent on those sandpapers and it works magnificently. And you just get this really glossy, smooth, complete finish when you use solvent on it. And the other benefit is that you can apply light colors over dark colors on the sandpaper, and it's certainly a learning experience working on sandpaper, as I imagine it would be for many people working on pastel mat. But if I had better access to sandpaper, I would do all of my colored pencil landscapes on sandpaper. I think that it's probably the best option. All right, now I'm going to take my blue, and I'm using 145, Polychromos 145, and I'm just going to, oh goodness, the blue kind of curves like this. I don't want those lines to show, but the gradient is rounded like this, so I'm going to kind of just do a light layer over here, just showing me that curve. And now I'm just going to start filling in the sky with this color. The white did smooth it quite a bit. So let's see how the rest of the sky looks after a few layers. And I feel like we just did a sky with the last project, and it's really not the most interesting of technical parts of a landscape. At least this one has a little bit of clouds, although it's very similar to the mist that we put in our last one. And so if you guys have any questions for me, this is the best time to get the best answers because I'll have a lot of extra time where I don't have to do a lot of thinking, so I can focus on answering questions. And my technique here is to just do circular motions. Generally with skies, I'm moving horizontally, but I feel like because of the graininess of this paper, the horizontal strokes might show lines a little bit too clearly. So I'm just going to do this, little circles. You may have noticed in the line art that given the scale, the huge size of the reference, the line art doesn't capture too many details. And that's simply because of the size in which I intended to work on this. So if you have the desire to do like a full scale rendering of the reference photo, you may need to adjust your line art to something that's a little bit more detailed. I kept it relatively simple because I had no intention of trying to get those really, really small details given the size that I'm working. When you get those really nice reference photos, it's so easy to start putting in the line art, start creating the line art, and you just like zoom in really close and you start, outlining every teeny tiny detail, and then when you go to put it on your paper, you realize, oh, I can't even draw those teeny tiny details, and they just look like black dots or something. The other thing that I left out in the reference photo, from the reference photo in the line art, is that if you look closely, you'll notice that there's a fence, a really, really ugly fence that surrounds the cliff around this lighthouse, and it has a really unique like poles. The poles look like a tripod of some kind, and it's just a security fence, and I just ignored that fence entirely when creating the line art, because there was no way that I was going to put that ugly fence, or even try to put that ugly fence in to the picture. So my lighthouse is a little unsafe because there's no security fence preventing people from either entering the lighthouse or falling off the cliff. I don't know which one they intended with the fence, but it's pretty bad looking. Yeah, the texture that I see from the paper looks really, really similar to the sanded paper. Almost identical, I would say. You have all those small raised bumps. Gotta try to go a little bit faster. Otherwise, I'll never get this sky done. How would I describe how to tell the difference between warm and cool blues and grays? That's a good question. So let's deal with grays first, because I think the grays are a little bit easier. Now, the general difference between warm and cool grays will be, does the gray look like there's a hint of yellow or a hint of sunshine in the color? The cool grays tend to lean more towards a natural looking gray that you would associate gray looking like. Whereas the warm grays, they actually have like, they tend to lean a little bit more brown because of the yellow, and that yellow is warming them up. And so that's how you can tell the difference between a warm and a cool gray. The cool gray tends to be very neutral gray, just like if you take pure black and pure white and mix it together. And well, that would be actually a neutral gray. Cooler gray would be like, a flick of blue or something in it. But and then the warm gray would be the same thing, but with, a flick of yellow in it. And that's really all that is different between warm and cool grays. Now with blues, it's a little bit harder to describe, because usually people just don't associate warmness with blue. And I think for a lot of people, they are almost unaware that there are warm and cool blues, just as there are cool and warm yellows. And the the easiest way, from my perspective, to tell the difference between a warm and a cool blue is to think about a neon blue. It's really hard to describe what a neon blue looks like, right? Like what is neon blue? Neon blue just looks like a really highly saturated color that almost emits a light. The color is so bright and so saturated, it emits almost like a light source, which is, why we call them neon colors, because they're so bright. And they look like neon signs. Well, the warmer the blue, the closer it gets to a neon blue. And if you take that neon blue and you add white to it, you're going to still have a warmer blue. It will just be a little bit lower valued, and the white inevitably removes a bit of the saturation. So that's kind of how I would describe the difference between a warm and a cool blue. So the cool blue you would associate more with just a natural looking blue, that, the sky is usually a cooler blue, or water is a cool blue. Skies don't tend to be neon. In this picture, the sky is quite warm, simply because the photographer that edited the photo increased the warmth of the picture overall. So, does that wear out your pencils quicker? No, I don't. I don't think it's really wearing it out too much. I'm not applying a lot of pressure, and I'm kind of spinning it a lot to make sure that it stays sharp. And that's one of the things with sandpaper that I've used in the past, is that the sandpaper, you'd think, just grinds down your pencil, and you got to sharpen it a million times just to, fill in a small area. But it actually, the grinding of the pencil and turning the pigment into almost a powder, because you're grinding it on the paper, it spreads out farther with solvent. Now that's on sandpaper. I don't know how the solvent will work on the pastel mat, but we're about to find out when and if I ever get the sky filled in. I think this is why I tend not to gravitate towards doing landscapes with colored pencils, because colored pencils already take a really long time, and on a landscape, it's pretty hard to avoid the sky. And if the sky is complicated, then it takes just a tremendous amount of time to do the sky. It would just take, honestly, it would be a whole tutorial just itself. It would take weeks and weeks just to do a complicated sky with colored pencils, whereas it would take, a half hour to an hour with pastels. And so that's why I tend to not do landscapes very often with colored pencils, because when it comes to the sky, there's just no shortcut, unfortunately. At least not one that I've yet to discover. And it's really hard to get just a full, smooth, consistent color without having a little bit of artifacts and blemishes throughout. When I do animal on pastel matte with colored pencils, I sometimes use watercolor pencils for the base layer. That way I get in the tooth. Oh, okay, yeah. Oh, hello, Stacy and Diana. We have a Diane, we have a Danny, and a Diane. Diana. Good to see you guys here. I'm glad you were able to make it to the live stream. I should try sanded paper with the powder blender that makes great skies. I have. Yes, I have. I agree. The thing is that I can't get the sandpaper easily. I have to order it from the UK. I have to order it in sheets, and it costs just as much to ship the paper as it does to buy it. So the paper itself cost me about 20 pounds, and it cost about 18 or so to get it shipped here because they only sell them in A1 sizes and they don't roll them, which, you know, I would prefer them not to roll the paper, but they ship them in giant flat boxes that cost way too much to ship. Because I really liked, you know, I'd never truly decided whether or not pastel matte or sandpaper was better for pastels. I just can get pastel matte so much easier, so I use it by default. Fortunately, it's really good. The Magenta Touch paper is affordable and is great, maybe for colored pencils. The Magenta Touch paper is not good for pastels. It has too many imperfections that cause areas that won't take layers, and so it's to get a consistent full coverage. You'd be lucky to find a sheet that doesn't have those imperfections. I thought the Magenta Touch paper was good for pastels until I used pastel matte. And then I had something better to compare it to. Oh my goodness. I should have done this project even smaller, don't you think? It didn't occur to me that like more than half of this picture is just the blue sky. I may have I may have overlooked that small detail because we'll be here for some time. I will basically spend this live stream answering any of your guys' questions because I don't think that I'm going to stream the entire filling in of this of this sky. I really overlooked just how much sky I'd be filling in, And so I guess I'll leave it up to you guys what you want me to do about this sky. Let's see. Can you get free international shipping from Jackson's? No, I cannot. Not into Poland, at least. Poland has very, very strict, extremely strict import laws, and they tax everything as much as they possibly can, because they discourage buying products from outside the country because they want you to buy from a Polish company. I'm not familiar with Powder Blender. Is there already a video of you using it? Yes, yes. I did a series of live streams just over on YouTube for everyone. They're not here on Patreon. And I did, I think, trying out for the first time. It was a series of live streams, like 3, 4, or 5 of them, where I did an apple sitting on a table, and I live streamed the whole process and kind of just talked about my experience with using the powder blender plus the what's it called, the textured fixative that you have to use in combination. And I really liked the results. It was a fun experience. Not exactly the way that I want to work with colored pencils. You know, there's so many different ways that you can work with colored pencils, and you know, some ways you're gonna like, and that's the way that you want to work with them, and then other ways, you know, you don't really like, and that's not the way you want to work with them. And as great of a result you get using the powder blender method, it's just not the way that I prefer to use colored pencils. I'm more of a minimalist in that regard, in the sense that you know, I kind of just want to use the pencils and, you know, not really anything else. And then, you know, waiting for the drying time and all of that. That's why I'm actually leaning more towards not using solvent. Simply, I mean, using a paintbrush, you know, I like to paint and stuff, but when it comes to colored pencils, I kind of just want to keep it simpler. And I've been leaning towards not using as much solvent. But using solvent also saves time. So there's, you know, there's pros and cons to all of it. Can you even use Powder Blender on Pastel Matte? Oh, you can even use it. Yeah. Pastel Matte is one of the papers you can use the Powder Blender on. And I almost considered using it for this project because of, well, for obvious reasons, the sky. Decided to try this even though I don't see colors. Are Prisma pencil names more in line with the actual color? Is there a color wheel with the pencils depicted on it? Oh, I don't know. That's a very unique question. I would say whatever result you get, I would say that no matter what color or lack of color that you're able to see. Sorry, I have something stuck in my throat. Focus purely on capturing the value. If that's the way you see, then the only thing that's going to matter to your work is that you capture the values correctly. And whatever colors you end up using, I can assure you, it will probably create one of the most unique pictures imaginable. And I would seek to do that instead of trying to I don't know, instead of trying to use the colors that you think that they might appear as to other people. Use the colors as they appear to you. And because I'm not aware of a chart that has the pencils laid out on an actual color wheel. That seems like a really great idea, actually, but I don't know if there is such a thing. I haven't ever come across it, but I did an experiment long time ago using just use a black and white reference photo, and you just use color. You don't match, any specific color. You just use color to create the values that you see in the black and white image, and it creates a really, really cool effect. And I imagine your work would probably look similar to that really unique effect. As you can see, I've reverted to horizontal pencil strokes to maybe try to fill this in a little bit quicker. I'm not seeing a lot of the pencil direction anyway, so I think it's perfectly fine. But in regards to the previous question about does it wear down the pencil, I don't feel like it wears it down any faster than a normal piece of paper. I mean, I've almost covered the sky, and I haven't sharpened this pencil yet, so we'll see if I can, how far I can take the pencil before I have to sharpen it. Oh, that's cool, Helen. Yeah, my oil paint, in between layers, it took about a week to dry. Of course, only the surface is dry, because inside the oil paint, beneath the surface is always moving a little bit. I'm really curious if this is going to smooth out the way the pigment usually does on sandpaper when I use solvent. Because I'll finish the live stream by using solvent, I think. I don't think I can not do it. I have to just keep applying. I'll try the blending stump before I do that. But hopefully the solvent will do what I somewhat expect it to do, because it's so similar, or it feels so similar to the sandpaper. If the solvent does work the way that it works with sandpaper, then I might end up liking pastel matte. One of the things with the sandpaper though is that I could just be scribbling right now, really just grinding the pigment into the paper, and then the solvent would just smooth it out and make all the lines disappear. So I'm wondering if that's the way it will be with the pastel mat. In that case, the sky shouldn't have taken so long. I'm just being very careful not to make any obvious lines. Or at least trying to. It doesn't seem to be doing the job. It's kind of patchy right now. Alright, let's move on to a new color, shall we? I'm going to add a little bit of this. This is slightly darker. This is a 152, Polychromos 152. Yes, the brand of pencils I'm using is Polychromos. I've kind of been attached to them the past few weeks, but you could just as well use Prismacolor for sure. In fact, Prismacolor may be a better choice. I don't know. The softer pencils might be a little bit easier to, I don't know, work on this paper. Does the solvent seem to react differently with different pencil brands? Yes, it even reacts differently per pencil within the brands. There's a number of colors, and I can only think of one off the top of my head, but the black cherry Prismacolor, that color completely changes. It looks really dark purple-ish when you just color it down, but if you add solvent, it turns like really red. So there's certain pencils that just when you add solvent to them, the color just changes, and you kind of get used to it over experiencing it, and you learn which pencils do it and how they change, and you can use it to your advantage. I would say generally in most cases they don't change, but the color intensity tends to be pretty drastic if you're just getting used to using solvent, because there's a lot of people that don't use solvent at all. I would say there's probably more people that don't use solvent than there are people that use solvent, and so it's just another technique that takes time and practice to kind of master and get used to use it with consistency. I still like using solvent, but I sometimes don't like the result, because sometimes the solvent just reacts a little different at times and doesn't make the picture look as good as I would want it to. It tends to desaturate and leave like a fogginess over after it dries, and so you always have to like reapply color. I haven't been able to get like a consistent cover or a consistent like finish. That's what the word I'm looking for. A consistent finish on my colored pencil work when I use solvent. That's why I always tended not to use solvent when I do portraits, because I always felt like it left a kind of a foggy look on the skin afterwards, and yeah, I don't know what else to say about it. It just seems to that to be the case. So. But with the sandpaper, it never did. So there's that one difference. It looks different on sandpaper. Have to get some dinner. Oh, okay, Helen. Thank you for coming by and hanging out for a little bit. Have fun with the dinner and your oil painting. Okie dokie. I would say like a little bit more layering with the lighter blue, maybe some of the white down here, and that should be enough pigment. I want to make sure that I have plenty of pigment on the paper before I do add the solvent, because I don't really want to have to work the sky again, although most likely we'll have to. Alright, so in that case, I'm going to sharpen this pencil real quick, so just give me a second. If the solvent works the way that I'm hoping it does, then pastel matte will probably be the paper I do landscapes on from this time and forever. I'm really hoping the solvent does what it does with sandpaper. Otherwise we're gonna have to reevaluate our project. This is the first time that I've ever like experimented with something like this on a Patreon tutorial. So we're all learning today, that is for sure. We're all learning today. I'm using a little bit of my gray color. and some white. What grit do you use for the sandpaper? I believe 800. Yeah, 800 grit. Otherwise, you can start the process with the sky and finish the sky off line. Then next week, start on the next section. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. We're gonna find out soon whether or not the solvent works the way that I am hoping, but also think it might. So we'll see. If it does work the way that I'm hoping, then the water is going to just look fantastic. I'm hoping that it works that way. I'm gonna switch back to a little bit of gray. And some more white. Alrighty, moment of truth. Where's my pencil solvent? I'm gonna clean my brush. Well, make sure my brush is clean, I mean. There's probably a lot of green in it from the grass that we did on the last project. Don't want a green sky. All right. Moment of truth. Let's go ahead and do this. That really dried my brush quick. Okay, so it does kind of look similar to the sandpaper, but I almost feel like I'm wiping it off. Probably gonna have to do another layer or two to get it to be consistent. But we might have the landscape paper for colored pencils. Gosh, I can just see it absorbing. That's very, very different than the UArt sandpaper, because that paper, it's backed on like almost a waterproof surface. Like the sandpaper is on like I don't know what kind of paper, but it feels more plasticky, and so the solvent doesn't absorb into the paper like it's clearly doing here. I can actually like see it pooling out. Goodness, that is bright. That is a very bright blue. Wow, that really just, it dries my brush up so quickly. I can barely even spread the pigment before my brush is dry. I think I accidentally grabbed one of my bad pieces of pastel matte. Like last year or something, I ordered some pastel matte and it came and there was a crease down the binder or the cover of the gummed pad, and when I opened it, all of my paper had a crease here. This one, I can see it right here. It's very subtle, so I don't know if you guys can see it on camera, but so there might be a little bit of a crease throughout this picture here. Hopefully not too bad. Probably only really show up in the sky. Yeah, it does almost look like watercolor. It's like almost like watercolor pencil. The way that the solvent is working on this paper. I feel like I have a lot less control with the solvent than I do on sandpaper, though. It feels very loose, which makes it feel even more like watercolor than colored pencil. I'm really curious how the clouds are gonna show up. Wonder what they're gonna look like. I like that I can just brush away like all of the inconsistencies in the sky and just kind of fade all of it together. It definitely has a softer, a much softer look than normal paper when you use solvent. So I can definitely see the mass appeal of using the pastel matte with colored pencils. I can see why so many people like it. It does have a really nice soft finish, which is not too much different than the sandpaper, but with the sandpaper you actually get more of a waxy finish. So this feels like a matte finish, whereas the working on sandpaper feels more like a gloss or satin finish. It just has a bit of a shine to it when you look at it from an angle with light hitting it. Whereas this one seems just nice and neutral, nice and matte. I don't think I had enough pigment over here by my lighthouse. I gotta rework that a bit. The pigment moves so much. Like, it just moves so much. I think I'm gonna let my brush dry a little bit and just kind of work the pigment slower. Try to get rid of some of these brush strokes. It does have much more of a sky-like feel to it, though, than our normal, or my normal paper. I always liked painted skies more than drawn. Oh, excuse me. That came out of nowhere. I always liked painted skies more than drawn skies. Yes, the pigment, so just the paper does absorb the solvent, my brush does dry, but the pigment is very workable. You can just kind of reactivate it, which is also very similar to sandpaper. So this is, though it's not exactly the same as sandpaper, it is quite similar, because you can reactivate your pigment with solvent on sandpaper too. But it's not so absorptive as this one. Alright, getting down to the clouds. I have no idea how this is going to go. I'm going to just not dry, or just let my brush dry a bit more, because it's more white down here, and I applied a lot of white, so I'm really curious of how that's gonna work down here. If I'm gonna be able to move that white around and it not just all turn plain blue. Well, the good news is the water is going to be real easy to do, since it smooths everything out. Yeah, the water is going to be probably the easiest part of this project, even as complicated as it might look. Basically, we'll just do alternating lines and then just blend it with solvent, and we'll just have really great looking water. Well, that's yeah, that's actually not too bad looking. I think another layer on the sky, another layer of color, make this a little bit darker, maybe just add some white over here too, mixed with the blue, and I think we're gonna have a pretty decent looking sky. Another layer around the clouds too, and that should look good. but not too bad. Not too bad. Some of these little bald spots here, they just kind of look, like a light cloud coverage, that inconsistency in the sky that naturally is there. But overall, pretty good. It has a little less control than what I'd like. A lot of bleeding, or not bleeding, but a lot of feathering, because the paper absorbs. I don't know if you can see that, but it's just taken the pigment and absorbed it beyond what I was brushing, and it did a little bit on the Lighthouse too. That should be coverable later on with layers, so shouldn't be an issue. But yeah, pretty fun experiment so far. But that is going to be it for today. Pretty decent looking sky. I have to admit, I was getting worried there for a second, applying all that pencil, and it was pretty rough looking. But the solvent definitely pulled through, and it looks pretty good. It almost looks like a watercolor painting. So we could end up having a really fun result with our landscape. We could have almost a watercolor looking landscape, which I don't think would look too bad. Anyways, whether or not you learned something in today's live stream, I certainly did, and it's going to be a fun project. So I'll see you guys later for the Inktober live stream, but that's going to be it for now, and you guys enjoy the rest of your day. I'll see you. Take care. Peace.